my friends!
Freakazoid Animated Series, 1995 to 1997. If you were a kid in the 90s and loved cartoons that mixed superhero fun with total craziness, then Freakazoid probably has a wild spot in your heart. But if you didn't catch it, you really missed out on one of the most brilliantly bizarre shows that Warner Brothers Animation has ever put out. The zany genius of Freakazoid was created by Bruce Timm and Paul Dini. Yes, the same dream team behind Batman, the animated series, and was truly exceptional for its time. It easily combined silly humour with that quirky absurdity we associate with the pop culture trends today. Basically, it was a cartoon that didn't just wink at the audience, it looked straight into the camera, told a joke, and then did a 360-degree spin. Anyhow, a show that was more a paradoxical satire than anything needs a recap, don't you think? I mean, the sheer number of cross-cultural references is overwhelming here. So, buckle up as we revisit Freakazoid and celebrate its manic magic nearly 30 years later. Season 1, 1995 to 1996. Episode 1, 5-Day Forecast, Dance of Doom, Handman. Part 1, 5-Day Forecast. In a brief and theatrical opening skit, Freakazoid steps in as an overly dramatic weather forecaster. With wild gestures and over-the-top flair, he paints a terrifying picture of an apocalyptic storm bearing down on the region. He conjures up ominous clouds, throwing around exaggerated meteorological jargon as if the sky itself is about to fall. Thunder rumbles, lightning flashes, tension builds with every word. Then, just as the atmosphere reaches its most intense, Freakazoid abruptly shifts tone. With a sudden, almost casual movement, he pulls the looming storm clouds away like a stage curtain, revealing a standard, unimpressive weather chart beneath. The spectacle evaporates, and he nonchalantly states that conditions will improve shortly, as if the previous chaos never happened. The whiplash contrast between the melodrama and the mundane captures Freakazoid's signature absurdity, don't you think? Perfect premise, blending parody and slapstick into a surreal take on your average weather report. Part 2, Dance of Doom. The story begins at a quirky high school dance themed around daylight saving time, complete with clock decorations and the awkward energy of teenagers. Just as the night gets going, the celebration is hijacked by Cave Guy, real name Royce Mumphrey, a blue-skinned, eloquent villain with a love for opera, fine art, and a subscription to The New Yorker. With dramatic flair, he takes the dance hostage, sending the crowd into a panic. Among the students is Dexter Douglas, who quickly slips away to transform into Freakazoid. What follows is a chaotic and comedic showdown between highbrow villainy and unpredictable heroism. Freakazoid uses an arsenal of bizarre tricks, physical comedy, and fast-talking banter to keep Cave Guy off balance. The clash is equal parts cartoon absurdity and superhero spoof, ending with Freakazoid outwitting the villain, rescuing the students, and casually restoring order to the dance, just in time for the punch to be refilled. Part 3, Handman. In the final segment, Freakazoid enthusiastically unveils his newest sidekick, Handman, a crudely drawn face on his own hand. What starts as a silly gag quickly spirals into an unexpectedly whimsical subplot. To everyone's surprise, Handman finds love in the form of Handgirl, another doodled character brought to life with the same irreverent flair. The segment leans into absurdity as the two tiny hand heroes embark on a whirlwind romance. Episode 2, Candlejack, Toby. Danger in Doomsday Bet the Lobe. Part 1, Candlejack. Set at the eerily named Camp Wenamiguna home, this segment centres on a spooky campfire tale told under a starry sky. The story warns of Candlejack, a ghostly figure who appears whenever someone says his name out loud and kidnaps them. Naturally, the campers, including Freakazoid, can't resist testing the legend. One by one, they repeat the forbidden name, only to be snatched away by the mysterious spectre. Freakazoid, true to form, gets taken too, but not before hatching a wild, cartoonish plan. In classic slapstick style, he sets a trap involving a strategically placed pie. Simple, absurd, and oddly effective. The scheme works, turning the tables on Candlejack and freeing the captured campers. I think this segment blends light horror with zany humour, poking fun at urban legends while embracing the show's trademark blend of parody and surreal comedy. It's spooky, silly, and perfectly Freakazoid. For real. Part 2. Toby Danger in Doomsday Bet. A playful send-up of classic adventure cartoons like Johnny Quest, this segment follows the bold and ever-serious Danger family on a globe-trotting mission. Episode 1. Dr. Vernon Danger, his eager son Toby, and their loyal allies find themselves up against the sinister Dr. Sin, a villain with a flair for theatrics and a grip on the world's largest semiconductor. His target, Las Vegas, where chaos is just a switch away. With retro flair and tongue-in-cheek dramatics, the story races through action-packed moments and dramatic narration, all delivered with a wink to the audience. The final showdown unfolds in the unlikeliest of arenas, a flashy casino where one high-stakes bet holds the fate of the world. Full of dramatic zoom-ins, melodramatic lines, and over-the-top music cues, the segment lovingly parodies the tropes of mid-century animated adventures while packing in just enough absurdity to stay true to Freakazoid's offbeat tone. Part 3. The Lobe. The villainous Lobe finally gets the upper hand, capturing Freakazoid and strapping him to an operating table in a dramatic, theatre-style medical amphitheatre. The setting is over the top, complete with spotlights and an eager audience made up entirely of supervillains, watching with glee as Lobe prepares to perform a lobotomy. By his side is Steph, Freakazoid's friend, hypnotised into playing the part of a dutiful nurse, her usual spark dulled under mind control. Just when all seems lost, Freakazoid flips the script in true, unpredictable fashion. He reveals that he has hidden a bomb inside his own head, stunning everyone into chaos. The revelation sends the villains into a frenzy, breaking the illusion of control and plunging the scene into mayhem. Amid the confusion, Freakazoid seizes the moment, escaping in a whirlwind of absurdity and unexpected brilliance, leaving the villains reeling and the audience's cheers turning into gasps. Episode 3. Moron / Sewer Rescue / The Big Question / A Musical Interlude / Legends Who Lunch / Finale / Out Here. Part 1. Moron. An alien spacecraft dramatically touches down on the White House lawn, drawing the attention of Freakazoid, the President, and top military officials. Eager for a groundbreaking moment of interstellar contact, they approach with anticipation. From the ship emerges Moron. It is an alien who insists he carries a vital message for humanity. Excitement quickly turns to exasperation as it becomes clear that Moron, though well-meaning, isn't exactly the sharpest. Unable to remember the all-important message, he leaves a baffled and increasingly frustrated crowd behind. Part 2. Sewer Rescue. The segment introduces Lord Bravery, a British superhero more concerned with appearances than action. Pushed by his wife and overbearing mother-in-law to boost his public image, he reluctantly takes on a mission to prove his worth. His task? Rescuing a man stuck in a sewer. It should have been a noble deed, but somehow it quickly turns into a farcical ordeal. After all, we witnessed Lord Bravery's vanity and discomfort with the gritty side of heroism, didn't we? Instead of glory, he finds embarrassment as the job is anything but glamorous. One thing I personally love about this segment is how it humorously underscores the gap between a hero's ego and the often messy reality of saving the day. Part 3. The Big Question. Another alien encounter begins with grandeur as a mysterious spacecraft lands, its occupants claiming to seek answers to a question of universal importance. The world braces for a moment of cosmic significance, expecting revelations about existence or the fate of the universe. Instead, the aliens pose a bafflingly trivial question: the name of Barbie's sister. What starts as a solemn, suspenseful moment quickly unravels into sheer absurdity. It's a playful reminder that not all quests for knowledge end in enlightenment. Part 4. A Musical Interlude. As a brief but memorable comedic interlude in the episode's eclectic mix, Freakazoid takes center stage, seated at a grand piano under the spotlight. Introduced with exaggerated formality by the show's announcer, he prepares to play the familiar tune Chopsticks. What follows is anything but traditional. His performance quickly spirals into a chaotic, off-key mess. Yet, it's all by design, perfectly in line with his unpredictable nature. The contrast between the refined setting and the musical mayhem creates a delightfully weird moment. Part 5. Legends Who Lunch. In a clever parody of the Algonquin Round Table, a group of retired superheroes, Aunt Eta, Sergeant Scurvy, Lady Veracose, and others, gather in a cozy deli to swap stories from their glory days. As they reminisce about battles fought and capes worn, the scene gently pokes fun at the passage of time and the quirks of aging. Freakazoid, acting as their server, weaves humour into the moment, highlighting the contrast between past heroics and present-day realities. Part 6. Finale. At the Hollywood Bowl, Freakazoid steps forward to bid the audience goodnight, wrapping up the episode with his usual flair. From the ship emerges Moron, an alien who insists he carries a vital message for humanity. Just as the curtain seems ready to fall, Moron returns, finally remembering his long-forgotten message for humanity. But the timing couldn't be worse. The world ends before he can share it. What follows is pure chaos, as animated versions of the show's creators, Paul Rugg, Tom Ruegger, and Stephen Spielberg, break into a wild on-screen brawl. Part 7. Out Here. A faux ad stars Freakazoid in this last segment as he enthusiastically promotes a bizarre and surreal vacation getaway. With over-the-top visuals and nonsensical promises, he hawks luxury travel into a whirlwind of absurdity. Episode 4. Poseidon Adventure Parody. Slash and Fanboy is his name / Lawn Gnomes. Chapter 4. Fun in the Sun / Frenching with Freakazoid. Part 1. Poseidon Adventure Parody. Do you remember the 1972 disaster film The Poseidon Adventure? Well, as the title of this segment, it is an ode to that. But again, like all Freakazoid odes, it is a parody. So, instead of a monstrous tidal wave, the cruise ship is hilariously overwhelmed by an enormous wave of hair. Freakazoid's hair, to be exact. The sheer absurdity of the situation, with panicked passengers scrambling as the towering mass of blue hair crashes down, perfectly sets the tone. It's a surreal and unexpected twist that immediately signals the episode's offbeat, irreverent humour. By turning a classic disaster scenario into a bizarre hair-related calamity, the show playfully embraces its signature brand of chaotic cartoon logic. Part 2. And Fanboy is his name. Fanboy, a chubby, socially awkward teenager with an unshakable obsession for science fiction, comic books, and superheroes, makes quite a debut here. Eager and endlessly enthusiastic, he idolizes Freakazoid and dreams of becoming his sidekick. But Freakazoid isn't exactly thrilled. He's still brooding over the loss of his previous sidekick, Expendable Lad, who was unfortunately edited during a chaotic showdown with the villainous Milkman. Still, Fanboy refuses to give up. He follows Freakazoid everywhere, rattling off obscure trivia about his past adventures and villains with encyclopedic precision. His passion is equal parts endearing and exhausting. At first, Freakazoid wants nothing to do with him, brushing off the idea of another sidekick. But Fanboy's relentless spirit and deep admiration slowly chip away at that resistance. In time, Freakazoid reluctantly accepts him, and what starts as an annoying tag-along begins to evolve into an odd, if not unlikely, partnership rooted in pure fan devotion. Part 3. Lawn Gnomes. Chapter 4. Fun in the Sun. I think it is time to do some time travelling, quite the pun here. Anyhow, the segment opens in Denmark in the year 995 AD, where a band of mischievous lawn gnomes roamed the countryside. These pint-sized pranksters thrived on chaos, swiping food, hoarding coins, and even stealing pants from unsuspecting villagers, all for the sheer fun of it. Their antics eventually pushed a Viking too far, prompting him to call on his brother, Hrothgar the Wizard. With a wave of his staff and a few dramatic words, Hrothgar cursed the gnomes, turning them into stone statues by day. The curse would only lift if they performed genuine acts of kindness for humans, something far outside their usual wheelhouse. Fast forward 1,000 years, and the gnomes are still stuck in a cycle of mischief and failed redemption. Desperate to break the curse, they bumble through good deeds with all the grace of amateur do-gooders, often creating more problems than they solve. The entire segment plays as a clever parody of dark, brooding animated shows like Gargoyles, but with a ridiculous twist. These gnomes speak in an odd mix of New York and British accents for no apparent reason. The result is a delightfully absurd tale of magical punishment, reluctant redemption, and hilariously misplaced accents. Part 4. Frenching with Freakazoid. In this short but unforgettable closing segment, Freakazoid dons the persona of a French language instructor, offering a playful and off-the-wall lesson in basic French. Styled like a classic educational program, the segment pokes fun at traditional language instruction shows, complete with exaggerated pronunciation and over-the-top visuals. Of course, in true Freakazoid fashion, the lesson quickly veers into absurdity, mixing actual vocabulary with ridiculous antics. It's a charmingly bizarre interlude that blends satire and slapstick, turning a simple language lesson into a chaotic comedy bit. The result is equal parts educational spoof and laugh-out-loud nonsense, perfectly on brand for the show's tone. Episode 5. In Stereo. Part 1. In Stereo, where available. The episode opens with a tongue-in-cheek announcement from narrator Joe Leahy, playfully noting that the show is presented in stereo where available. Foamy the Freakadog. Freakazoid shares his misadventures with a wild, dog-like creature he adopts and affectionately names Foamy the Freakadog. Although clearly unstable and prone to biting, even Freakazoid himself, Foamy wins him over with his oddly endearing, chunky face. At first, Freakazoid is thrilled to have a sidekick, despite the chaos Foamy brings. But as their escapades grow more unpredictable and dangerous, it becomes clear that Foamy is more trouble than he's worth. In a surprisingly tender moment, Freakazoid decides to part ways with his unruly companion, offering a humorous yet touching take on the ups and downs of superhero partnerships. Lord Bravery, a well-meaning but beleaguered superhero, stumbles into a hilariously frustrating legal mess. To his dismay, he learns that a small local bakery has already trademarked the name Lord Bravery, throwing his heroic identity into question. What follows is a comic journey through red tape as he tries to untangle a maze of paperwork, name disputes, and bureaucratic hurdles. Desperate to keep his heroic brand alive, he settles on the bizarre alternative name Lord Smoked Meats and Fishes. Unsurprisingly, the public finds it ridiculous, and his new identity is met with confusion and mockery. Honestly, I find it absolutely clever how this segment cleverly pokes fun at the absurdities of trademark laws, the challenges of personal branding, and the clash between heroism and modern legal constraints. Through it all, Lord Bravery's persistence and misplaced dignity turn his plight into a satirical, relatable commentary on identity and red tape. Fanboy, the show's enthusiastic and eccentric recurring character, takes centre stage in this segment to deliver an offbeat yet heartfelt tribute to Leonard Nimoy. With his signature blend of awkward charm and poetic flair, he pours out his admiration for the legendary actor, best known as Mr. Spock from Star Trek. His over-the-top delivery and emotional sincerity strike a perfect balance between humour and genuine affection. The segment lovingly pokes fun at fan culture, while also celebrating the deep, often personal bonds that fans form with their heroes. It's a quirky, touching homage that captures the spirit of devoted fandom. Freakazoid steps in as the announcer for a parody of the classic emergency broadcast system test. With over-the-top intensity, he delivers the message at full throttle, his voice rising to absurd levels of urgency. The performance becomes so extreme that he nearly collapses from the effort, turning a routine public service announcement into a full-blown spectacle. The segment hilariously exaggerates the often abrupt and overly serious tone of emergency alerts, using Freakazoid's wild energy to highlight just how jarring and unintentionally funny these broadcasts can be when taken to the extreme. It's chaotic, clever, and unmistakably Freakazoid for real. The episode wraps up with a delightfully offbeat educational segment as Freakazoid sets out to teach viewers a bit of basic Norwegian. Zeroing in on the word narwhal, he launches into a wildly exaggerated pronunciation lesson, complete with dramatic accents, playful mispronunciations, and plenty of absurd flair. What starts as a simple language tip quickly spirals into comedic chaos, perfectly in line with the show's unpredictable tone. While it may not leave viewers fluent in Norwegian, the segment delivers laughs through its sheer silliness and enthusiasm. Episode 6, The Chip. Part 1. On Christmas Eve, Roddy McStew, a former engineer at Apex Microchips, barges into a company meeting with a dire warning. He reveals a critical flaw in the company's latest invention, the Pinnacle chip. This flaw, he explains, can pull someone into the internet if a specific key sequence is entered and followed by pressing the delete key. Once inside, the person transforms into a Freakazoid, gaining erratic superpowers and access to the full knowledge of the internet. But Apex, driven by profit, chooses to ignore Roddy's warning. They decide against recalling the chip, brushing off the potential danger. Meanwhile, teenager Dexter Douglas receives a computer fitted with the very same Pinnacle chip. One day, while Dexter is away, his cat, Mr. Chubbikins, steps on the keyboard, unintentionally entering the dangerous key sequence. When Dexter returns and hits the delete key, he is instantly pulled into the digital world and becomes Freakazoid, a hyperactive, unpredictable superhero with a brain full of internet knowledge. At first, Dexter has little control over his new identity. He switches between being himself and Freakazoid without warning. In his new form, he sets off on wild, surreal escapades. He takes revenge on his overbearing brother, Duncan, and even travels all the way to Tibet to silence a monk whose obnoxious raking has been driving him mad. Roddy McStew soon tracks Dexter down, posing as a driving instructor to avoid suspicion. Knowing the truth about the Pinnacle chip, he offers to help Dexter understand and manage his powers. But just as the two begin to uncover the full extent of Freakazoid's potential, they're ambushed by henchmen working for Armando Giierrez, the ruthless head of Apex Microchips. What a frustrating cliffhanger, don't you think so too? Episode 7, The Chip, Part 2. Picking up from the previous episode, Dexter Douglas, a teenage computer whiz, continues adjusting to life as Freakazoid, the eccentric superhero born from a glitch in the Pinnacle chip. In this chapter, Dexter discovers he can now control his transformations by shouting the phrase, "I'm freaking out!" This newfound control gives him some confidence, but his powers remain unpredictable and chaotic. As Freakazoid, Dexter confronts Armando Giierrez, a villain with sinister plans to harness the same computer chip flaw for himself. Giierrez believes he can replicate the conditions that turned Dexter into Freakazoid, hoping to become a cyber-enhanced being with limitless power. But his ambitions are met with fierce, if unconventional, resistance. Freakazoid, still struggling to balance his heroic instincts with his wildly erratic behavior, oscillates between fearless savior and unpredictable prankster. His antics both bewilder and irritate his enemies, and even those trying to help him. Despite the chaos, Freakazoid proves resourceful and clever, ultimately defeating Giierrez and ensuring the safety of his family. Meanwhile, Dexter's mentor, Roddy McStew, becomes trapped in cyberspace during the conflict. Though physically lost, Roddy continues to guide Freakazoid remotely, helping him learn how to revert to his human form. His presence remains a steadying influence. For a brief break, the familiar voice of the announcer sets the stage with a dramatic introduction. The scene cuts to Freakazoid seated at a grand piano, poised as if ready to deliver a moving performance. He begins playing Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1, or at least he tries to. It ultimately is nothing but a hilariously off-key and clumsy rendition, with missed notes, awkward pauses, and exaggerated flourishes that completely undercut the piece's grandeur. In this adventurous and delightfully absurd segment, Freakazoid finds himself unexpectedly pulled into a time vortex while heroically attempting to save Air Force One. The vortex hurls him back to World War II-era Pearl Harbor, just moments before the infamous attack. True to his unpredictable nature, Freakazoid is briefly sidetracked by the sight of hula dancers before realizing the gravity of where and when he has landed. Determined to change history in his own unconventional way, Freakazoid constructs a towering toll bridge in the sky, halting the oncoming Japanese planes by absurdly demanding pocket change. It's a moment of pure slapstick heroism that fits perfectly within the show's zany tone. I am sure you have noticed how this one features a hilarious parody montage referencing a wide range of pop culture. After preventing the attack, Freakazoid is pulled back into the present, only to find that his time-altering antics have had bizarre consequences. In this new reality, Sharon Stone is a critically acclaimed Shakespearean actress. Rush Limbaugh is a liberal advocate for the poor. The episode wraps up with a final twist. The same mysterious storm that caused Freakazoid's time travel reappears, once again threatening Air Force One. This time, however, the plane is being piloted by Pinky from Pinky and the Brain, with the Brain himself serving as the president. Episode 8, Hot Rods from Heck, Part 1. Dexter Douglas and his family set out on a seemingly ordinary road trip, hoping for some quality time and open highways. But their peaceful journey takes a wild turn when they're suddenly ambushed by a gang of menacing robotic hot rods. These aggressive machines are under the control of Longhorn, a half-human, half-steer villain who was once a man named Jubal Nixon. Now transformed and unhinged, Longhorn has a bizarre plan. Hijack a Titan missile from the Air Force and threaten to launch it at Nashville unless the city grants him a recording contract. Sensing the danger, Dexter springs into action, transforming into the unpredictable and heroic Freakazoid. Realizing he'll need more than just quick reflexes, he heads to his Hall of Freakmobiles to choose the perfect high-tech vehicle for the job. What follows is a chaotic and hilarious adventure packed with underwater escapes, high-flying aerial chases, and off-the-wall gadgetry. Despite the odds, Freakazoid's mix of outrageous wit and improvisational genius gives him the upper hand. He weaves through every twist and trap, eventually stopping Longhorn's plan just in time. The missile is secured, Nashville is safe, and Dexter's family road trip becomes one for the history books. The huntsman makes his grand debut, summoned into action by the blaring call of the Horn of Urgency. Clad in heroic gear and brimming with purpose, he leaps into the world, ready to battle evil. But his enthusiasm quickly meets an anticlimactic reality. There's simply no crime to fight. As he scours the city for wrongdoing, he's met only with calm streets and everyday normalcy. What begins as a dramatic entrance turns into a comical tale of a hero without a mission. The episode wraps up with a clever jab at commercialism, as Freakazoid breaks the fourth wall to promote a fictional line of Freakmobile toys. With exaggerated enthusiasm, he showcases an array of toy vehicles, each more over the top than the last. The moment is a playful nod to the merchandising tactics often tied to superhero franchises, where action figures and branded gear follow every new adventure, ending on a humorous note that reminds viewers not to take things too seriously, even when it comes to saving the world. Episode 9, Relaxovision, Part 1. With a clever parody of TV censorship in mind, a new feature, Relaxovision, is unveiled. So, just as Freakazoid dives into action against a lineup of his usual over-the-top foes, Cobra Queen, Longhorn, Cave Guy, and Kid Carrion, the chaos is constantly interrupted. Just as punches fly or explosions erupt, the screen fills with calming visuals like waterfalls and sunsets. The result is both absurd and hilarious, as Freakazoid grows increasingly exasperated by the censorship getting in the way of his battles. In this segment, two plus-size superheroes, Fat Man and his loyal sidekick, Boy Blubber, arrive to rescue Louie, an overweight boy being picked on at school. At first, they stand up for him, confronting the bullies with confidence and flair, but their support quickly takes a contradictory turn. Instead of offering empathy, they begin criticizing Louie for his eating habits, zeroing in on the sweet bun in his hand. Their attempt to confiscate it adds an ironic twist, highlighting the gap between their appearance and their message. What begins as a rescue ends with mixed signals and an awkward lesson in self-control. Freakazoid's usual chaos in cyberspace comes to a screeching halt when he's suddenly nabbed by the idiot police, accused of committing excessive nonsense. Faced with a bizarre punishment, he must choose between 30 days in jail or a half hour with Fanboy. Hoping for the lesser evil, Freakazoid picks Fanboy. What follows is a hilarious test of endurance as Fanboy launches into an unstoppable monologue, obsessing over the box office numbers of obscure Disney films from the late 70s and early 80s. The Black Hole, Tron, Something Wicked This Way Comes. With no escape in sight, Freakazoid finds himself trapped in a uniquely torturous brand of cinematic trivia overload. The horn of urgency blares, suggesting trouble is near. Instantly alert, the huntsman leaps into action, ready to confront danger, but the alarm proves to be a false one. No crime, no crisis, just silence. What follows is a light-hearted yet poignant look at his growing frustration. He roams the streets, restless and searching, trying to rediscover meaning in a world that seems to have moved on from the kind of hero he once was. His attempts to stay useful, though earnest, often border on the absurd, highlighting both his determination and his deepening sense of irrelevance. Episode 10, In Arm's Way the Cloud. Part 1. Freakazoid sets out on a mission to find the perfect Christmas gift for his girlfriend, Steph. His search takes him to a bustling mall, where he stops to consult a department store Santa for advice. Santa suggests perfume, a classic choice, but Freakazoid remains unsure, second-guessing whether it truly captures the spirit of his relationship with Steph. Before he can decide, Freakazoid receives a call from his friend Mike, who runs a local hot dog stand. Mike's business has just been trashed by the infamous gangster Arms Akimbo, a former print model whose years of posing left his arms stuck in a permanent akimbo stance. No longer in the fashion world, Akimbo now runs a protection racket called Oops Insurance, threatening destruction unless business owners pay up. Determined to help his friend, Freakazoid continues shopping while gathering information. Along the way, he runs into various colourful characters, including his nemesis, the Lobe. Surprisingly, their interaction is pleasant, with both calmly discussing their holiday plans. It's a playful nod to the show's tendency to turn superhero conventions on their head, showing that even villains take time off to shop for presents. Eventually, Freakazoid tracks down Arms Akimbo inside one of the stores. Their confrontation is laced with absurd humour as they pause mid-conflict to argue over a play from the Superheroes Villains All-Star Benefit softball game, a previous encounter that still stirs debate. The clash ends in true Freakazoid fashion, with the hero spinning Akimbo into a shelf of coffee mugs, bringing his crime spree to a messy comedic halt. Police soon arrive to take Akimbo and his henchmen into custody. With the crisis averted, Freakazoid returns to his original mission. He seeks out Sergeant Cosgrove for advice on the perfect gift for Steph. After a moment of reflection, Cosgrove suggests that Freakazoid himself might be the best present of all. In the end, however, he recommends going with the perfume, bringing Freakazoid's quirky holiday journey to a satisfying and sentimental close. Freakazoid travels to the quirky European village of Schnitzel to investigate a mysterious cloud lingering ominously on a nearby mountaintop. Reports have surfaced that hikers who venture into the cloud emerge as full-blown clowns, complete with wigs, red noses, and oversized shoes. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Freakazoid teams up with his eccentric old friend, Professor Heine, who conveniently operates a laboratory high on the same mountain. As they make their way up the treacherous slopes, they encounter several hikers who have already fallen victim to the strange transformation. Through a mix of scientific deduction and chaotic mishaps, Freakazoid and Professor Heine eventually uncover the truth. The cloud is the unintended result of a botched scientific experiment. With teamwork and a bit of unconventional thinking, they manage to neutralize the threat and return the hikers to normal. Episode 11. Next time, phone ahead /nerdata. Part 1. Next time, bone ahead. In this affectionate parody of E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Freakazoid encounters Moron, a bumbling and endearing alien from the planet Barones, who has been inadvertently left behind on Earth by his fellow extraterrestrials. Taking Moron under his wing, Freakazoid attempts to acclimate him to human society, even bringing him into the Douglas household. However, Moron's clumsy nature and lack of understanding of Earth customs lead to a series of comedic mishaps, making it clear that he cannot remain hidden for long. Realizing that Moron must return home, Freakazoid assists him in contacting his alien companions. After a humorous ordeal involving the selection of a long-distance carrier settling on Sprint, Moron successfully phones home, leading to his eventual departure. The segment concludes with a tongue-in-cheek nod to the complexities of interplanetary communication and the challenges of cross-cultural friendships. Part 2. Nerdator. The second segment introduces a formidable new antagonist, the Nerdator, a predator-like alien who embarks on a mission to abduct Earth's nerds, including Dexter Douglas, with the intent of harnessing their collective intelligence to achieve world domination. Employing a specialized ray, the Nerdator captures his targets, aiming to absorb their technological prowess. However, his plan hits a snag when he encounters Freakazoid. Through a series of humorous interactions, Freakazoid exposes the less glamorous aspects of nerd life, highlighting the social challenges and eccentricities that accompany high intelligence. Convinced of the downsides, the Nerdata abandons his original scheme and instead turns his attention to abducting good-looking but vapid airheads, believing this new approach will be more advantageous. Episode 12, House of Freakazoid/Sewer or Later. Part 1, House of Freakazoid. On a stormy night, Lonnie Tallbutt, a man tormented by lycanthropy, turns up at the doorstep of Dexter Douglas, secretly the zany superhero Freakazoid. Desperate for a cure, Lonnie believes Dexter's bizarre transformation abilities might hold the answer to freeing him from his werewolf curse. At first, Dexter is doubtful, but when Lonnie transforms into a full-fledged werewolf before his eyes, the situation becomes impossible to ignore. Donning his Freakazoid persona, Dexter throws himself into the challenge with trademark enthusiasm and chaos. What follows is a series of wildly unconventional attempts to de-wolf Lonnie, including a slapstick shaving scene choreographed to Rossini's Barber of Seville, evoking the absurd brilliance of classic Bugs Bunny antics. Despite the theatrics, nothing seems to work, until Freakazoid has a typically outlandish idea: send Lonnie into cyberspace. In true Freakazoid fashion, the plan defies all logic. Yet, against all odds, it works. Lonnie emerges from the digital realm completely cured, much to everyone's surprise. The exact method behind the cure remains hilariously unclear, with the story leaning into its absurdity rather than offering answers. Though baffling, Lonnie's cure is ultimately a success, another bizarre triumph in Freakazoid's chaotic world. Part 2, Sewer or Later. In this bizarre escapade, Freakazoid finds himself squaring off against the Cobra Queen, a one-time shoplifter who transformed into a snake-themed supervillain after applying an experimental beauty lotion that had been left baking in the sun. Now, armed with snake-like powers and flanked by two enormous serpents, she slithers into a life of crime, targeting jewelry stores and hoarding her treasures deep within the city's sewers. The police refuse to follow her into the sewers, deterred by the unbearable stench, humorously dubbed poo gas. Even Freakazoid hesitates, visibly revolted by the idea of crawling through such a foul-smelling environment. After a series of comedic delays and exaggerated disgust, he reluctantly descends underground, driven by duty and a flair for the dramatic. Inside the grimy tunnels, Freakazoid confronts the Cobra Queen and her serpentine hench creatures. Rather than brute force, he relies on his sharp wit and chaotic creativity, challenging her to say increasingly difficult tongue twisters. Her excessive hissing renders the challenge impossible, and she collapses from the effort. With Cobra Queen subdued and the snakes neutralized, Freakazoid triumphantly exits the sewer. He's immediately met by Sergeant Cosgrove, who, like everyone else, can't help but point out the lingering odour. Episode 13, The Wroth of Giierrez. Deadpan, a mischievous, shape-shifting villainess, attempts to impersonate Freakazoid in a far-fetched scheme to take over Washington, D.C. Her disguise is convincing to almost no one, and her plan is quickly and comically foiled. Meanwhile, Armando Giierrez, the disgraced former chairman of Apex Microchips, is serving time in an unusually plush prison cell. As the creator of the flawed Pinnacle chip, the very one that transformed Dexter Douglas into Freakazoid, Giierrez hasn't given up on his ambition. Using his remaining corporate influence, he secures internet access from within prison. With the same chip flaw that created Freakazoid, he escapes into cyberspace and re-emerges as a more powerful digital version of himself. This upgraded Giierrez now possesses enhanced strength and a laser-firing eye patch, making him a far more dangerous threat. Back in the real world, Freakazoid experiences a sudden and mysterious drop in power. Concerned, he turns to his tech-savvy mentor, Roddy McStew, who explains that Giierrez has sabotaged Freakazoid's energy field from within cyberspace. The only solution is for Freakazoid to enter the internet himself and confront Giierrez directly. Despite the dangers, Freakazoid agrees, knowing there's no other option if he wants to restore balance and regain his powers. Once inside the digital realm, Freakazoid finds himself trapped in his favourite computer game, Amazing Castle. Giierrez fits him with a high-tech bracelet programmed to delete him unless he can unlock it within an hour. The clock ticking, Freakazoid must navigate the game's peculiar and often ridiculous challenges. Eventually, Freakazoid discovers a pair of enchanted sunglasses that allow him to see through illusions. Using them, he's able to identify the one real key among countless decoys and narrowly deactivates the bracelet just in time. He then confronts Giierrez in a final showdown. The two clash in a visually chaotic and comedic battle. When Giierrez unleashes his eye-patch laser, Freakazoid cleverly uses the sunglasses to reflect the beam, sending his enemy tumbling into a digital void. In a last-ditch effort, Giierrez tries to manipulate Freakazoid by claiming to be his father. Anyhow, this only resulted in a hilariously awkward moment before his defeat is sealed for good. With the crisis averted, Freakazoid restores his power and ensures Roddy's internet privileges are reinstated. To wind down, he joins Roddy and Sergeant Cosgrove for a movie night. They choose to watch Congo, and the episode ends on a comedic high as Cosgrove gets hilariously confused trying to figure out which of the apes are real. Season 2, 1996 to 1997, Episode 14, Dexter's Date. After 6 months of anticipation, Dexter Douglas finally managed to secure a date with Steph, the girl he had admired from afar for so long. Their evening was set at the elegant Washington Gardens restaurant, a place known for its refined atmosphere and impeccable service, the perfect setting for what Dexter hoped would be a memorable night. Everything seemed to be going perfectly, and Dexter could hardly believe his luck, but fate had a different plan in store. Out of nowhere, the villainous Lobe crashed the evening with a diabolical scheme. Armed with his latest invention, the video zapper, Lobe intended to hijack every television broadcast in history, scrambling the airwaves and plunging the world into chaos. Sensing the urgency, Dexter transformed into his alter ego, Freakazoid, determined to stop the Lobe before his plan could come to fruition. In the ensuing battle, Freakazoid managed to disable the video zapper, thwarting the villain's plot. Yet, the victory came at a peculiar cost. Freakazoid was electrocuted by his own powers, triggering a bizarre side effect, a shapeshifter mode lock. From that moment on, every attempt to return to his normal form caused him to morph uncontrollably into blue-skinned versions of various famous television personalities. One moment, he was Oprah Winfrey, the next, David Letterman, then Michael Jackson, Barney the dinosaur, and even Louis Armstrong. Each transformation was more disorienting than the last, leaving Freakazoid desperate and frustrated. Meanwhile, Lobe, feeling strangely unsatisfied despite his failure, slipped out of custody. Longing for a proper thrill, he made his way back to Washington Gardens, hoping to lift his spirits. To everyone's surprise, the restaurant staff had taken quite a liking to the villain. In an unexpected twist, they broke into an elaborate and spirited musical number titled Bonjour, Lobe, a playful parody of the classic Hello, Dolly. The sight of the usually sinister Lobe being serenaded with such enthusiasm was oddly charming, and even Dexter couldn't help but be amused. Desperate to break free from his shape-shifting curse and return to his date, Freakazoid confronted the Lobe. In a rare moment of cooperation, the villain offered a deal. Freakazoid must engage in a traditional superhero villain chase, one last wild pursuit to satisfy Lobe's craving for excitement. After a chaotic but exhilarating chase through the streets and back to the restaurant, Lobe revealed the simple cure for Freakazoid's condition: drinking warm water with a spoonful of salt. With hope renewed, Dexter finally reverted to his true self and returned to the restaurant, anxious that the night's interruptions had ruined everything. But to his surprise, Steph wasn't upset at all. Instead, she admitted she had enjoyed the unexpected twists, the musical number, the chase, and the unpredictability that had made the evening unforgettable. Before Dexter could fully process her words, Steph leaned in and kissed him on the cheek, leaving him elated and hopeful. Episode 15, The Freakazoid. I believe it's time for a birthday bash. Freakazoid's birthday, a day that should be filled with celebration, quickly spirals into chaos. According to a mysterious tome called the Superhero Codebook, tradition dictates that a superhero must honour any request made to them on their birthday. Freakazoid, ever the eccentric but well-meaning hero, takes this obligation seriously. Lobe, Freakazoid's arch-nemesis, known for his intellect and elaborate schemes, truly wants to exploit this birthday bash. He arrives bearing a strangely underwhelming birthday gift, a food dehydrator. More importantly, he makes a puzzling request, that Freakazoid simply leave him alone. Bound by the so-called superhero code, Freakazoid reluctantly agrees. What appears to be a harmless wish soon reveals itself as the first move in a much larger plan. With Freakazoid sidelined, the Lobe embarks on a full-blown crime spree, unchecked and unopposed. Making matters worse, all the other superheroes are conveniently off-world, attending a convention on an unnamed moon. Left completely isolated, Freakazoid has no one to consult about the authenticity of the request or the legitimacy of the code that binds him. Despite his unease, he clings to the rulebook, believing that integrity means following its guidelines, even when they don't make much sense. Meanwhile, the city begins to crumble under the weight of the Lobe's antics. The public, once enamored by Freakazoid's unpredictable heroism, starts to question his competence and loyalty. Without context, his inaction appears cowardly, even complicit. As the Lobe's plan escalates, Freakazoid begins to suspect something is amiss. He turns his attention to the origins of the superhero codebook, digging into its authenticity. What he uncovers is a critical twist. The book is a complete fabrication, planted by the Lobe to exploit Freakazoid's good intentions. The realization is both liberating and infuriating. Freed from the constraints of the bogus code, Freakazoid wastes no time nullifying the Lobe's request. He charges back into action, confronting his nemesis head-on. What follows is a classic clash of chaos and intellect, with Freakazoid ultimately outwitting the Lobe and putting an end to the crime spree. In the end, Freakazoid restores order and reclaims the public's trust. The episode closes with a return to the absurd but earnest tone that defines the series, reinforcing the idea that even the zaniest heroes need to trust their instincts. Rules may guide a hero, but it's integrity and a healthy dose of skepticism that truly defines one. Episode 16, Mission Freakazoid. While vacationing in the rigid, authoritarian nation of Vuka Nova, the Douglas family, Debbie, her husband Douglas, and their son Duncan, find themselves abruptly swept up in a political nightmare. Falsely accused of espionage, they're imprisoned in the infamous Chesky Beresh prison, a relic of the Cold War era known for its bleak corridors and even bleaker justice system. Their arrest is no accident. Behind it is the ruthless Minister of State Security, Janos Ivanovowels, whose convoluted name belies a simple plan: use the innocent American tourists as leverage to broker a trade for captured Vukanovan spies. Back in the States, Freakazoid is facing his own domestic crisis. His loyal, mute butler, Ingmar, suddenly resigns to pursue his dream of becoming a rodeo clown. The departure leaves a gaping void in Freakazoid's daily chaos management, prompting him to seek a replacement. Enter Professor Jones, an eccentric and theatrical man of mystery, complete with the arch mannerisms of a sci-fi relic, voiced with flamboyant nostalgia by Jonathan Harris. Realizing the gravity of the Douglas family's situation, Freakazoid hastily assembles a rescue team. Alongside Professor Jones are Sergeant Mike Cosgrove, ever calm and deadpan, and Freakazoid's spirited girlfriend Steph. Operating with the subtlety of a sledgehammer, the team sets out to infiltrate Vuka Nova and liberate the Douglas family. Their mission, however, is anything but smooth. From the outset, Freakazoid's over-the-top antics cause a series of cascading mishaps. At one point, he manages to reveal the team's location to the enemy via an accidental live broadcast. Meanwhile, Cosgrove, in his typically nonchalant fashion, lets slip Freakazoid's secret identity to both Steph and Professor Jones. Despite the mounting chaos, remote help comes from Roddy McStew, who stays behind to hack into the prison's outdated but still formidable security system. Upon arriving at Chesky Beresh, the team is met with resistance from Janos Ivanovowels and his brutal enforcer, Colonel Anton Mohaksh. The prison itself becomes a stage for pandemonium. Alarms wail, guards scramble, and Freakazoid turns even dire moments into slapstick theatre. Yet, through a blend of improvisation, brute force, and accidental genius, the team pushes forward. Amid the confusion, they encounter a mime inexplicably imprisoned and undergoing interrogation. Initially overlooked during the breakout, the mime eventually frees himself and trails behind, determined to exact a bizarre form of justice. As the villains are tied up in their own fortress, the mime delivers a silent yet psychologically torturous performance, a poetic punishment that leaves Janosch and Mohaksh visibly unnerved. In the final moments, the rescue team escapes Vukanova with the Douglas family in tow, narrowly evading capture thanks to a combination of comedic luck and last-minute cunning. The episode closes in true Freakazoid fashion, the villains incapacitated, the prison in disarray, and the mime contentedly taking a final bow as chaos fades into the distance. But honestly, I would be a little disappointed if you guys didn't notice that this entire episode's premise was a parody of none other than Mission Impossible. Episode 17, Part 1, Joe's Very Own Story. Joe Leahy sets the stage for a dark and chaotic tale set in a New York City neighborhood overrun by supernatural threats, man-eating plants, Dracula, and even King Kong. As the tension builds, a network censor abruptly halts the story, declaring it far too frightening for the audience. Forced to comply, Joe reluctantly rewrites the tale into a much tamer, cheerful version, stripping it of its original horror and chaos. This humorous twist not only disrupts the narrative, but also serves as a playful jab at television censorship. By breaking the fourth wall, the show calls attention to the creative restrictions imposed by networks and transforms them into part of the storytelling itself. The episode's self-aware tone and satirical edge highlight the series' unique ability to blend comedy with commentary, poking fun at how entertainment is often reshaped to fit palatable, sanitized standards. Part 2, Virtual Freak. Freakazoid and Sergeant Cosgrove tag along with Steph on a trip to the mall, where she's searching for the perfect birthday gift for her father. What starts as a simple shopping errand quickly spirals into chaos when the trio stumbles upon Virtual Tussle, a flashy new virtual reality game. Intrigued, Freakazoid and Cosgrove decide to try it out, unknowingly stepping into a trap. Freakazoid assumes the role of Portho, a dramatic, red-armoured warrior from the Glim system, while Cosgrove becomes Mel, a blue-armoured fighter from the modest-sounding Morton Grove. But they don't realise that the villainous Lobe is manipulating the game's technology behind the scenes. He hijacks the system, trapping Freakazoid and Cosgrove's consciousnesses inside the game and releasing their virtual avatars, Portho and Mel, into the real world. While their real selves navigate the bizarre and perilous in-game terrain, their avatars wreak havoc in the mall, oblivious to the destruction they're causing. Inside the virtual realm, Freakazoid and Cosgrove face a series of ridiculous yet dangerous challenges, including a dramatic chase with a flying pterodactyl named Dino. Despite the peril, the show's signature humour persists, especially when Freakazoid breaks into an off-key rendition of Am I Blue, a moment that's promptly cut short by Dino's aggressive return. Meanwhile, in the real world, Steph is left to deal with the mess. Determined and resourceful, she takes it upon herself to confront the Lobe and find a way to bring Freakazoid and Cosgrove back. Her frustration is palpable, especially as she recalls past run-ins with the Lobe, including an incident where he tied her to a rocket, an amusing nod to the show's continuity and her long-suffering role as the voice of reason. As Portho and Mel continue their chaotic battle throughout the mall, shoppers scatter and property damage escalates. The Lobe, ever the eccentric villain, watches with amusement and casually mentions his plans to shop for a couch, further underscoring his oddball menace. His indifference to the destruction he's caused is both ridiculous and oddly charming in true Freakazoid fashion. Back in the game, Freakazoid and Cosgrove manage to turn the tables. Using the Lobe's own tactics against him, they trap him inside the virtual world, subjecting him to the same surreal challenges they endured. In a moment of poetic justice, the Lobe finds himself in a never-ending fall, a gag that's stretched for comedic effect. Freakazoid's deadpan reaction to the absurdity pokes fun at the show's own tendency to draw out jokes far beyond their natural stopping point. By the episode's end, the characters return to their rightful places, but not without leaving a trail of mayhem and laughs behind. Episode 18, Hero Boy. Freakazoid was entirely absorbed in watching his favorite show, Hero Boy, a black-and-white parody of vintage Japanese anime. Hero Boy followed the misadventures of a well-meaning but hopelessly clumsy robot boy with the noble catchphrase, "I must succeed." Despite his impressive powers of flight and strength, Hero Boy rarely managed to defeat the monsters he faced. Each episode usually ended the same way, with the robots slumped in failure, declaring, "I have failed to succeed." It never got old for Freakazoid, who found endless joy in the earnest ineptitude of his animated hero. While Freakazoid laughed at the screen, danger was brewing elsewhere. Armando Giierrez, Freakazoid's old nemesis, returned with a chilling new upgrade. Cybernetic enhancements now covered the left side of his head, the result of their last explosive encounter. With his sinister presence amplified by cold machinery, Giierrez made a global broadcast, threatening to vaporize the entire world unless Freakazoid turned himself in. In a rare moment of seriousness, Freakazoid surrendered. He was captured and locked away in a high-tech cage within Giierrez's lair, but the villain's plan didn't end with imprisonment. He revealed a deeper scheme to ruin Freakazoid's name forever by replacing him with a clone, a twisted version designed to commit crimes and discredit the hero. The Freaka clone was released into the world, promptly engaging in a series of petty but reputation-damaging offences, from tax evasion to mail fraud. At first, the authorities and public were baffled by Freakazoid's sudden descent into lawbreaking, but not Sergeant Mike Cosgrove. He knew Freakazoid too well. His suspicion peaked when the clone brushed off an invitation to a Yakov Smirnoff film festival. Cosgrove recognized the red flag immediately. Freakazoid would never pass up something so ridiculous. Realizing something was amiss, he began investigating, slowly piecing together the truth behind the imposter. Meanwhile, back in captivity, Giierrez grew dissatisfied with his initial clone. Determined to create a more accurate copy, he initiated a new scan of Freakazoid's brain, instructing him to think happy thoughts. Always the wild card, Freakazoid obeyed, but focused entirely on Hero Boy. The result was far from what Giierrez expected. Instead of a better clone, the machine began churning out multiple replicas of the anime's earnest protagonist. The lair soon overflowed with Hero Boys, all fluttering around, repeating their signature phrases and ultimately overwhelming the cloning system. The resulting chaos caused a total system failure, blowing out circuits and setting off alarms. Amid the confusion, Freakazoid broke free from his cage and made his escape, trailing behind a swarm of malfunctioning robot boys still loudly announcing their failures. Giierrez, defeated once again, fled in the only escape option available, the Freakmobile, but his escape turned out to be more punishment than freedom. The vehicle's inbuilt gas-and-go crew, a relentlessly chipper group with a penchant for singing, immediately launched into an endless stream of cheerful tunes. Giierrez, trapped with their non-stop harmonizing, was driven to the brink of madness. Though he got away, it was far from a triumphant exit. And as the real Freakazoid returned to clear his name and reclaim his ride, one thing was certain: he had succeeded in the most chaotic way possible. Episode 19, A Matter of Love. Freakazoid had just finished rounding up a petty criminal when he decided to unwind by inviting his friend Cosgrove to a performance by Gulliver, a spoof of the eccentric comedian Gallagher, famous for smashing watermelons with a mallet. To Freakazoid's surprise, Cosgrove politely declined, saying he had other plans. This wasn't like Cosgrove, and Freakazoid couldn't shake the feeling that something odd was going on. Driven by curiosity and a hint of jealousy, he decided to follow his friend. What he discovered startled him. Cosgrove was dating Mary Beth, a charming and glamorous cosmetics mogul with a mysterious air about her. She was magnetic, confident, and clearly adored by Cosgrove. Freakazoid tried to shake off his unease, attributing it to overprotectiveness. But the feeling deepened during a Mambo-themed party when he noticed something disturbing. After a clumsy accident, Mary Beth briefly morphed into a monstrous form before returning to normal. No one else seemed to notice, but Freakazoid couldn't ignore it. Disturbed and suspicious, Freakazoid sought out the eccentric Professor Heine, a specialist in strange phenomena. The professor proposed an absurd yet oddly specific test. If Mary Beth could light a candle using only her nose, it would confirm she was, in fact, a monster. It sounded ridiculous, but then again, so was most of Freakazoid's life. Later, Freakazoid accompanied Cosgrove to dinner at Mary Beth's lavish home. The evening began pleasantly enough, though Freakazoid remained on edge. At the right moment, he presented the candle and politely suggested the test. What followed was swift and terrifying. Mary Beth lashed out, her monstrous form now fully revealed, hideous, powerful, and furious at being discovered. Without hesitation, she imprisoned both Freakazoid and Cosgrove in her subterranean lair, revealing her true intentions. She needed Freakazoid's essence, his chaotic energy and power, to sustain her youth and beauty. Cosgrove, merely a pawn in her plan, looked on helplessly as she began the draining ritual. Then, in a surreal twist that broke the very fabric of the narrative, Cosgrove turned to the audience, addressing them directly. Calm and deadpan, he asked viewers to clap their hands and say a single word: Hugbees, a nonsensical term introduced earlier in the episode, with no real meaning but strange significance in Freakazoid's bizarre universe. The audience played along, and their enthusiastic response somehow disrupted Mary Beth's spell. Energized by the absurd collective chant, Freakazoid broke free of his bonds and launched a final, zany assault. With a mix of manic energy and cartoon physics, he overpowered Mary Beth. Defeated, she disintegrated into dust, her charm and beauty vanishing along with her monstrous facade. As the chaos settled, Freakazoid and Cosgrove emerged from the lair. The moment that should have been triumphant, instead, felt bittersweet. Though Mary Beth had been a monster, her affection for Cosgrove hadn't seemed entirely fake. The danger was gone, but so was a piece of something tender, however fleeting. The two friends walked away in silence as a soft, melancholic tune played in the background. Episode 20, Statuesque. The eccentric and perpetually scheming Wayland Giierrez resurfaces with a new invention, the Medusa Watch, a bizarre contraption capable of turning living beings into stone. To his delight, a quick test on an unsuspecting pigeon proves its effectiveness. However, before he can bask in his success, Freakazoid intervenes, confiscating the watch and scolding Giierrez for his obsessive, unorthodox pursuits. Freakazoid urges him, perhaps a little too smugly, to consider a more conventional lifestyle. Humiliated and furious, Giierrez vows revenge. Determined to strike back with greater force, Giierrez turns to the supernatural. He finds a copy of How to Summon Monsters the Easy Way and, without much hesitation, uses it to summon Vaughn the Unspeakable, a massive, otherworldly creature with a tangle of tentacles and a flair for destruction. Vaughn, grateful to his summoner, declares he will annihilate Giierrez's enemies. At the top of that list, Freakazoid. Meanwhile, Freakazoid is enjoying a rare moment of calm on a date with Steph. Their evening is cut short when Giierrez and Vaughn ambush them. In the chaos that follows, Giierrez seizes the opportunity to use the Medusa Watch again, this time aiming for Freakazoid. But Steph, acting without hesitation, shoves Freakazoid out of the way and is struck by the beam herself. She turns to stone instantly. Shocked and devastated, Freakazoid is left reeling, seeking answers and a way to reverse the petrification. Freakazoid turns to his usual allies, Sergeant Cosgrove and Professor Jones. The trio consults the eccentric Professor Heine, who provides them with background on Vaughn and clues pointing to Giierrez's possible hideout, Venice Beach, California. Their journey becomes a globe-trotting quest filled with bizarre creatures and strange detours, a surreal art exhibit made entirely of fruit preserves. The trio presses on with a blend of determination and reluctant amusement. Eventually, the trail leads them to Venice Beach, where Giierrez and Vaughn are hiding in poorly conceived disguises. A chaotic showdown erupts on the beachfront. Amid the flying debris, monstrous tentacles and Giierrez's wild antics, Freakazoid uses his trademark mix of absurdity and quick thinking to sow discord between the villains. As tensions rise, Giierrez and Vaughn turn on each other. In the confusion, Freakazoid manages to reclaim the Medusa Watch. With a dramatic flourish, he uses the device to petrify both Giierrez and Vaughn, halting their rampage. While inspecting the watch afterward, he discovers a small switch labelled Undo. With cautious hope, he activates it, and to his immense relief, Steph is restored to her normal, non-stony self. The episode closes on a bright, sunny day. Freakazoid, Steph, Cosgrove, and Professor Jones relax on the beach, enjoying some well-earned peace. In the background, the stone forms of Jeepers and Vaughn stand tall and immobile, now rebranded as public art installations. Episode 21, Island of Dr. Mystico. The episode opens mid-flight, with Freakazoid at the helm of a high-security prisoner transport plane en route to France. On board are some of his most infamous adversaries, the Lobe, Cave Guy, Longhorn, Candlejack, and Cobra Queen. They're being escorted by Freakazoid's trusted allies, Sergeant Mike Cosgrove, Steph, and Professor Jones, ensuring the villains reach their destination without incident. However, the mission takes a disastrous turn when the plane suddenly crashes on a remote, uncharted island. The crash is no accident. Behind it is the eccentric and exiled scientist, Dr. Mystico, who resides on the island and has devised a bizarre system involving a giant mirror to blind passing aircraft, forcing them to crash so he can harvest new subjects for his twisted experiments. Dr. Mystico, once a respected academic, was banished for crossing every ethical boundary imaginable. Now, surrounded only by his unnervingly affectionate cat, Sparkle, and his unsettling creations, the Orangumen, human orangutan hybrids named Fatima, Akbar, and Ringo, he schemes in isolation. His latest plan? Fuse the brains of Freakazoid and his companions with those of his orangutans to create a super army bent on world domination, though he often muddles this goal with conquering Cleveland instead. In the chaos following the crash, the group becomes separated. Candlejack slyly distracts Professor Jones, while Cobra Queen, unexpectedly cooperative, helps Steph repair the damaged aircraft. Meanwhile, Freakazoid, Cosgrove, the Lobe, Cave Guy, and Longhorn venture into the dense jungle in search of help. Unfortunately, they don't get far. The Orangumen ambush them and drag them back to Mystico's lair, imprisoning them in a cage constructed from molecular bamboo, a material as ridiculous as it is unbreakable. Inside the cage, they discover two other captives: film critic Leonard Maltin, ever composed, and a completely incoherent Henry Kissinger, both of whom had also fallen victim to Mystico's mirror trap. As the reality of Mystico's brain-swapping plot sets in, tension builds. Yet, ever resourceful, Freakazoid hatches a plan. Using a still-functioning cell phone, he contacts Greg, the show's new production assistant, asking him to bring the key to their cell. Moments later, Greg shows up, cheerful, efficient, and armed with the key, a round of coffee, and a handful of memos for the group. With their cell unlocked, the team scrambles to escape before Mystico can put his deranged plan into motion. But Mystico isn't finished. He and the Orangumen intercept them on their way out, forcing one final confrontation. Realizing brute strength alone won't be enough, Freakazoid quickly rallies the group. Together, they manage to overwhelm Mystico and his creations. With the villains subdued and the threat neutralized, the group reunites with Steph and Professor Jones at the now repaired plane. They board quickly, leaving behind the island and its deranged inhabitant as they soar back towards civilization. Another strange adventure in the rear view. Episode 22, Two Against Freak. Freakazoid, under the eccentric guidance of his Scottish mentor, Roddy McStew, attempts to harness telekinesis by levitating a brick. What should be a straightforward mental exercise quickly devolves into chaos, thanks to Freakazoid's erratic personality. Each attempt backfires, often painfully, and what begins as a lesson in focus turns into a slapstick montage of self-inflicted injuries. Eventually, these repeated failures leave Freakazoid with a deep, irrational fear of bricks, an ironic outcome for someone trying to control one with his mind. Despite this mental block, Freakazoid is assigned a security detail, guarding the prestigious Diamond Hat of the Tsars at a Washington, D.C. exhibit. Things go awry when two of Freakazoid's longtime foes, Cave Guy and Cobra Queen, join forces in an elaborate heist. Freakazoid, still grappling with his brick phobia and unable to maintain focus, fumbles the mission entirely, accidentally trapping himself under the diamond's display case. With the hero immobilized, the villains make a clean getaway. In the aftermath, Freakazoid is hospitalized, forcing Roddy McStew and Sergeant Cosgrove to take over the pursuit. Meanwhile, Cave Guy and Cobra Queen solidify their unlikely partnership. Equal parts romantic and criminal, the duo's dynamic is bizarrely tender, marked by flirtation in between felonies. Together, they devise a clever plan to mislead authorities, banking on Cobra Queen's infamous sewer lair reputation. While the police comb the city's underground, the stolen diamond hat is hidden in an entirely unexpected location, the long-abandoned Uncle Buzzy's Funland amusement park. A camera crew follows Cosgrove around as he performs his usual offbeat brand of policing. Whether it's taking naps at his desk or interrogating suspects over lunch, Cosgrove remains hilariously nonchalant. One standout moment occurs at the amusement park, where he and the crew hide inside a spinning teacup to avoid a giant snake. An absurd but fitting image for the show's tone. Back in the hospital, Freakazoid is racked with guilt over the failed mission and haunted by his phobia. But when he learns that his friends are in danger, something clicks. Determined to make things right, he pushes through his fear, finally mastering his telekinetic powers. With renewed confidence, he heads to Uncle Buzzy's Funland for a final time. The confrontation is predictably wild. Freakazoid, now in control of his mental abilities, faces off against Cave Guy and Cobra Queen in a chaotic battle of powers and pratfalls. With bricks no longer a threat, he turns the tables on the villains, using his telekinesis to outwit and ultimately defeat them. The diamond hat is recovered, and the criminals are taken into custody, though they remain oddly affectionate with each other even in defeat. Later on, Cosgrove brushes off the reality show crew, unimpressed by their dramatics. In typical fashion, he shrugs off the whole ordeal as just another day on the job, while Freakazoid, finally triumphant, revels in his brick-free victory. Normadeus. Lobe is consumed by a simmering envy, not for musical genius, but for the unparalleled craftsmanship of master carpenter Norm Abram. In this topsy-turvy tale, Norm stands in for the prodigious Mozart, while the Lobe broods in the shadows like a cartoon Salieri, seething at Norm's effortless excellence in all things woodwork. Anyhow, unable to match Norm's carpentry prowess, the Lobe concocts a grandiose and wildly impractical scheme to construct a colossal wooden sound cannon, the Lobe Finestra 3000. The horn, capable of emitting vibrations that can disintegrate matter, becomes his weapon of choice to finally rid the world of his nemesis Freakazoid. There's just one problem. The Lobe's own woodworking skills are, in his words, regrettably subpar. Not one to be deterred, he abducts Norm Abram, forcing him to build the devastating instrument under duress. True to his flair for melodrama, the Lobe doesn't stop at technological overkill. He sends out gilded invitations to a villainous who's who: Cave Guy, Longhorn, Cobra Queen, Wayland Jeepers, Candlejack, Invisibo, and Armando Giierrez. But there's a twist. Each villain must enter a raffle to determine who gets the honor of firing the horn. The gathering unfolds like a villainous gala, brimming with over-the-top pageantry, scheming egos, and awkward small talk. Meanwhile, Freakazoid is captured and dramatically suspended in front of the Lobe Finestra 3000, his usual antics momentarily subdued by the threat of imminent doom. As tension builds and the horn begins to power up, all seems lost, until Norm, resourceful as ever, uses his carpentry know-how to free himself from captivity. With a steady hand and an arsenal of woodworking techniques, he quietly and efficiently saws through the ropes binding Freakazoid. Norm and Freakazoid team up to take on the villainous ensemble in a wild, exaggerated battle filled with comically choreographed chaos. Classic sound effects fill the screen as characters fly, crash, and tumble with cartoonish absurdity. Norm, though not a fighter, proves surprisingly effective with a nail gun and a well-placed 2x4, while Freakazoid revels in the mayhem. After the dust settles and the villains are defeated in typically undignified fashion, the tone shifts into something unexpectedly touching. In a final act of whimsy and sentiment, the entire cast, heroes and villains alike, gathers at the Hollywood Bowl. Against the backdrop of a glowing night sky, they perform a heartfelt rendition of Vera Lynn's We'll Meet Again. As we wrap things up, it's pretty clear why both critics and fans back then were so enthusiastic about the show. Even though Freakazoid had just 2 short seasons, its impact has definitely stuck around. The clever jokes, unexpected laughs, and daring style really caught on with its viewers. However, Many also noted that its rapid-fire jokes and surreal tone made it a tough sell for mainstream cartoon audiences. Some called it too smart for kids and too goofy for adults, which in hindsight feels like the ultimate compliment to me. It is surprising how ahead of its time the show felt to me, especially in an age of meme culture and self-aware superheroes like Deadpool. Maybe what really makes Freakazoid a cult classic is its refusal to follow the rules. It didn't really aim to fit into just one category. It was this wild mix of superhero parody, sketch comedy, and a fun take on pop culture, all wrapped up in a neon blue whirlwind. Even though it didn't get the ratings it truly deserved, over the past 30 years, fans have really kept the show's spirit going strong. I mean, just comb across Reddit threads or Twitter retrospectives and you will get the idea. The sheer nostalgia blogs where people share their favourite bits, like Candlejack, Lord Bravery, or the Hello Nurse style banter runs rampant. So whether you're revisiting Freakazoid for a nostalgia trip or discovering it for the first time, one thing's for sure, there's still nothing else quite like it. And maybe that's exactly what made it so freaking good.